Hey everybody, good evening. Glad to see you here. I'm Nate Eaton. This is Courtroom Insider coming to you live from Boise. I'm in a new hotel. Hopefully you can see me okay, and hopefully the Wi-Fi is much better than last week. Oh my goodness. So much to talk about. This is one of those days where you just can't get it all in. And if you didn't watch today, it was fascinating. We heard for the first time ever, well, I shouldn't say ever, because Chad Daybell's kids did do an interview in 2021 with CBS News, and but we heard from them on the stand, at least from two of the children, and we're going to talk about what they had to say. We're going to talk about their testimonies, their thoughts about their mom. A lot of the focus today was on their mom, her health, when she died, when she was shot at in the driveway, what she was doing as she was preparing for the book fair at the school before she died, all sorts of stuff like that. I do want to know where you're watching from, and I do want to know if you have any questions, so please put those in the comments. Today was a big day personally. My wife came with me to the trial today, and she came on the craziest day that we've had, not only as far as testimony is concerned, but as far as people. There were more people who wanted to get in today than ever before. I have said almost consistently that if you want to get in, you can get in. That is no longer the case. A lot of people did not get in today. And it was so many people that they're bringing back the ticketing system starting next week. So honestly, if you don't, I would recommend, if you were a good friend of mine, which you are, to not try to make a trip to Boise if you're from out of town to try to get into the courtroom this week, just simply because there have been so many people and you're not guaranteed a seat, and you might end up sitting out in the hallway, which I feel bad for so many people that had to do that today. So a lot of interest today, and I understand why. But Erica came. I'm going to get her on the phone. She's driving home right now. Our comment moderator, Peggy, came too. So the Peggy who pulls all of your shout outs and questions, she was in the courtroom with her husband, Glenn. Fortunately, they got in. They drove over last night and spent the night. And so I'm going to have Peggy come on tomorrow to give you her thoughts about being in the courtroom today. I'll be honest, some days in the courtroom, I'm looking at the clock saying, when's the break? When do we get to go to lunch? Today was not one of those days. Today it was like, oh shoot, we got to take another break because there was so much to talk about. But as I said, today the kids take the stand. Let me make my screen full so you can read it a little easier. There we go. The kids take the stand, and here's what we're going to talk about tonight. The defense begins. We have a defense. John Pryor began calling witnesses, and Emma Murray was the very first one. That is his daughter. She took the stand. That says Emmy. It should say Emma. I'm so used to typing Emmy because that's my daughter's name, but it's actually Emma Daybell Murray. Garth Daybell, his son, oldest son, took the stand. And we learned on the record officially that there was a grand jury held for Garth on perjury, potential perjury charges. What does perjury mean? He lied on the stand. Now, I do want to make it clear, he was not charged with that, and they made it clear that that grand jury didn't go anywhere. He hasn't been charged, but it was investigated, which is very interesting. And his attorney showed up today and took the stand, which was a twist that I didn't see coming. Then Joseph Murray, Emma's husband, took the stand. I'll answer as many questions as I can, and we will, of course, remember JJ, Tylee, and Tammy. Let's jump right into Emma Murray. John Pryor made it clear at the beginning. He said, I want to, ask you, how many times have we spoken before in the past? And Emma said maybe 3 times. They did meet last night to probably go over the testimony, but John Pryor said, have I ever told you what to say? Emma said no. Have I ever suggested to you on how you should testify? She said no. It was simply kind of, here's what I'm going to ask you, back and forth. Emma lives at Chad Daybell's home. At the time that the children were found and the time Tammy Daybell died, she lived in a house kitty corner from the property. And after Chad Daybell was arrested, she moved into the home where her mom died and where the kids were buried. She testified a lot about Tammy's health. As I mentioned, this was kind of a theme today. Emma testified about it. Garth testified about it. We also heard Joseph testifying about it. But we didn't hear much about the kids, other than that they knew that they were buried on the property. And probably because these kids, this group of kids, Chad's kids, didn't really have much to do with Lori's kids. But they did have a lot to do with Tammy. And so, to me, the overarching theme of today, if you were to ask me, what's the defense so far? The defense so far is that Tammy was sick and died of illness. Died of being anemic and having anemia, died of, I don't know what else. But that's kind of the theme that these siblings portrayed throughout. Emma did say she learned about her dad having an affair. We'll talk about that. I do want to show you, there were, if you watched the video feed, it's not the best camera footage in the world, but here is a photo from a few years ago of Emma in the middle. She had her hair dyed blonde today, by the way. Joseph Murray is on the left, that's her husband, and then Garth Daybell's on the right. And they were obviously, it looks like they're on a plane there, but these are the three that took the stand today. And we're going to jump right into one of the first things that John Pryor, so remember, now that it's the defense witnesses, John Pryor starts with his questions. Before, the prosecutor's witnesses, they got to ask all the questions, John Pryor would object, and then he'd get a chance to cross-examine and then redirect. It's switched roles now. John Pryor starts, then the prosecution objects if they want to, and then they get a chance to do redirect or to do cross-examination, and then Pryor can do redirect. So we've kind of shifted the mold now, obviously, because that's where we stand in the case. Here is just some of the first, right off within 10 minutes, John Pryor brought up Tammy's health with Emma, and here's what she had to say. Or not. Hold on one second. I have the clip here. Clip number 1. There were so many clips. I have to tell you that so many clips. Right here is where clip number 1 is to pull from. If you were in the courtroom, or if you watched. And by the way, if you weren't, I want to know what you thought as you were watching today. While please, being respectful to those who did testify. I'd love to know what you thought. Okay, I'm going to find that clip and we're going to come back to it. But it was one of the first things that John Pryor brought up. Okay, I think I found it right here. Let me just get that one moment. Thank you for bearing with me. Okay, so that's just reloading, and I'll get that clip played for you shortly. As Tammy's health was discussed as one of the main topics across the board for everybody, we also we also heard and learned about Tammy, according to Emma, being an introvert. Tammy stuck to herself. She didn't tell a lot of people at school about her business. She did talk a lot with Emma. Emma and Tammy worked at the same school, so Emma saw her every day, all the time. And she talked a little bit about Tammy. She said Tammy was not doing well, that Tammy was slowing down. Tammy was getting tired. Tammy was getting exhausted. Tammy was having health issues. Now, of course, this contradicts the testimony that we heard over the past 5-6 weeks from multiple people who knew Tammy, who said Tammy was healthy. Tammy was fine. She went to Zumba. She went to clogging. She went to all of these physically demanding activities. And those people never noticed any sort of situation with that. And the question is, what happened with that? Okay. I think I have the clip. Thank you for your patience. Here we go. Make it full screen so you can see it. And we will play it from
Yes.
here.
And is it your assessment that your mother physically was in a fit state?
No, part of why she wanted the Fitbit was to increase her physical fitness.
Okay. She was working on her physical fitness.
Yes, she had one, I had one, and she bought my dad one, but he wouldn't wear it.
Okay. I want to talk a little bit about your husband Joe's parents. Who are they?
Ed and Charlene Murray.
Okay. And was there some sort of a competition between your mother and Ed and Charlene Murray?
If you make an account in Fitbit, you can add friends. They're people that you know, and you can compete with them to see who takes more steps during the day.
Okay. And were you aware of any competition that was going on between Ed and Charlene Murray and your mother?
Yes, my father-in-law took a lot of steps during the day, and she wanted to be the winner, and so she would try to beat him.
Would you describe your mother as a competitive person?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. And was there anything unusual with the way your mother operated her Fitbit?
Yes.
Objection, Your Honor. Calls for speculation.
Sustained.
At any time, did you observe your mother using an unusual manner in which to operate her Fitbit?
The Fitbit is designed so that way you walk and it measures your step by your arm moving. You can count more steps than you are actually taking if you shake your arm. And at nighttime,
Honor, I'm going to object and voir dire native objection.
You may voir dire, Ms. Blake.
Thank you. Ms. Murray, do you recall visiting with your dad on or about November 17th of last year?
no,
Do you recall a conversation you had with him about the Fitbit and your dad telling you that your mom would hang her arm over the bed and swing it?
I observed my mom do that.
Do you recall having that conversation with your father?
No,
All right, Ms. Blake, is there an objection?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, you can continue, Mr. Pryor.
Thank you. So back to the
Okay, I wanted to play that part. So, one thing I should have said is that at the beginning it came out, actually, I believe that Lindsay Blake says this in a clip later, that Emma and her father have spoken nearly every day since he was arrested 4 years ago. Every day, almost. Sometimes multiple times a day. Emma and her father talk about a lot of stuff. We didn't hear any recordings today, but you'll notice that John Pryor was asking about the Fitbit that Tammy wore. And Emma suggested that because Tammy got in this competition with her husband's parents, Tammy would sometimes, shake her wrist or swing it like this to try to up the steps. And Pryor asked about that, and that's when Lindsay Blake objected and said, do you recall back in November of 2020, whatever she said, your dad saying that he had seen Tammy with her arm off the bed doing that? And Emma quickly said, no, I saw that myself. The Fitbit was brought in because, remember, we had the witness testify, I don't remember which witness at this point, that Tammy was getting her steps in. She was healthy. She was making sure she got those steps in every day, and on months she didn't. The average was pretty consistent, and she got the Fitbit, as Emma said,
you have an
specifically
occasion
to
in,
get healthy.
September at the start of.
Here we go. Okay, so that was the stuff there. I do want to talk a little bit about the day before Tammy died. There was this book fair. Well, no. I shouldn't say there was a book fair. Tammy was prepping for a book fair, apparently. And Tammy was carrying big boxes of books out to the parking lot or in the school. I don't remember if they specifically said where she was carrying these books, but she had boxes, and it was full of these books. And Emma said that she was in a meeting at the time. Emma Murray was in a meeting at the time when she saw her mom carrying these books, and she was barely carrying this box. And so Emma went out to help her carry this big box of books. And she also said that her mother bruised easily, and that seemed to suggest that maybe the bruises on her arm maybe could have been from those boxes. That was the testimony that Emma had. Now, I do want to play, I believe I have this other clip ready to go, about Tammy Daybell's health. And, oh, whoops, here we go. So there was talk about that. Remember this 5K too that we've heard about? This 5K that Tammy was training for, that a lot of people said she was training for, that a lot of people said she was involved in. Well, according to Emma, she didn't run the 5K. She helped with the 5K, and there may have been a photo of her out there crossing the finish line in the 5K, but she didn't quite run it and didn't complete it, even though, as I mentioned, people said that she had done it. Okay, here is the clip of her talking about her mom's health.
I want to talk a little bit about your mother's health. What can you tell me in general about your mother's health in the last year or so?
Her health started declining. I was really worried about it. She'd always been one to be able to meet the demands of daily life without being exhausted. And she started going to bed at before dinner some nights. It would be 5, 6, 7 o'clock at night. And she would sleep in too if given the opportunity. So suddenly needing to sleep a lot was very confusing to me.
Are you aware of any health issues that your mother may or may not have had?
I, at the time, was not. Since her passing, I've been diagnosed with sleep apnea, and my maternal grandfather also has sleep apnea, and she's the generational link between. So I wonder if she did. That's something that obviously we can't investigate at this time, but symptoms like daytime tiredness and not getting restful sleep seem like they would fit what speculation.
It's sustained.
Okay. Were you aware of any other health maladies that your mother may have suffered from?
She had anemia.
Okay. Were you aware of any medications that your mother may have taken?
She preferred herbal supplements. She did take the generic form of the medication Prozac.
Okay.
That was the only prescribed medication that she regularly took.
Were there any non-prescription medications or herbs or supplements that you're aware of?
Oh, definitely. She really liked using colloidal silver was her favorite. It's
Slow down for me. Colloidal silver?
colloidal silver. It's distilled water with particles of silver in it to the part per million. It tastes like you're drinking water out of a metal water bottle, and it can cure everything.
Okay. And
I say that with a smile because you really should go to the doctor instead of drinking.
Calls for speculation.
World.
go ahead.
She would use colloidal silver as an antiviral, is what she called it. So anytime she felt under the weather, she would take colloidal silver and she would.
This calls for hearsay.
Overruled.
Go ahead.
I witnessed her drinking it and she would encourage other people in our household to do so.
Were you a consumer of colloidal silver?
I was.
Okay. How'd that work for you?
It tastes nasty.
Okay. Did it help you in curing any ailments that you may have had?
I don't know.
Were there other things that your mother did in terms of remedies to resolve other issues she may have had?
She bruised really easily and she used arnica gel.
Okay.
Arnica is a plant that helps with bruising. She had it in gel form.
Okay, so there we hear a little bit about how Emma says her mother was treating ailments with this colloidal silver, with the cream, the gel that she would put on her arms, things like that. Now, she talked about how when they would go to Zumba and exercise classes, they'd These classes were held in the dark with the lights out so that people that felt a little bit embarrassed about having to show up to these classes, those that were out of shape, she said, like, you know, her and her mom, they wouldn't be seen. So no one could really see their progress or see how they were doing. She said that she had started the clogging classes 6 weeks before she died. Tammy had. And John Pryor seemed to suggest that witnesses that said she had been going for a year really didn't know what they were talking about. Then we get into the insurance, the life insurance. Remember how a couple of weeks before Tammy died, the life insurance was upped on her policy at the school, and John Pryor asked about that. And what Emma said was interesting, and how it was brought back up again later on Cross was interesting too. Not only that, this bit of information came out along with something we've never heard, that remember the search on Chad Daybell's computer the day before Tylee died for the southwest winds, the day before she was buried? Emma said she is the one that did that search because she was planning an outdoor event. She went on her dad's computer to search. I want to know your thoughts on this. Anyway, here is what she said about both of those topics.
September at the start of school to engage in a presentation by the Ballard office?
At one of our faculty meetings, they came and talked to us about life insurance and increasing it. And they showed us that the rates were competitive, or it was really cheap insurance. And so they encouraged us to purchase some, and both my mother and I purchased some at that meeting.
Okay, and at the meeting, was it at the meeting that both of you just elected to purchase the insurance?
Yes,
So prior to that, and I can't remember, in September of 2019, I believe you were married at that point, is that correct?
I was.
Did you consult with your husband before you elected to up your insurance at that point?
Objection, Your Honor, relevance.
Sustained.
Are you aware as to whether or not your mother consulted with the insurance, with your father prior to upping her insurance on that meeting day with Taylor Ballard?
Objection, Your Honor, calls for speculation.
Overruled.
Are you aware of whether or not your mother consulted with your father on that day to up her insurance?
Objection, Your Honor, calls for hearsay.
Overruled.
You can answer it.
We were sitting at a table and filled out the paperwork together. We both signed to take out more life insurance on ourselves, and we did not consult with our husbands.
Okay. And at that point, did you take up the maximum amount of insurance that you could purchase at that point?
I did not because I could not afford it. I later did.
Okay, at the next period.
Yes,
But it's your understanding that without discussing with your father, your mother elected to up her insurance to the maximum amount.
I saw her check that box on the paper.
Okay. I want to change gears a little bit. And there was some testimony about a Google search for southwest wind. And that would have been on 9/8/19. Do you recall that?
I do.
And was that your father who did that search?
That was me.
And what was the purpose of doing that search?
I saw a rainstorm. We were planning an outdoor event, and I wanted to know if those clouds were coming our way. The weather forecast for where we live in Rexburg is sometimes inaccurate because we don't live in Rexburg. So I was trying to be an amateur meteorologist, and the weather app said it was coming from the southwest, and I didn't know if that meant it was coming or going from the southwest. And so I did a Google search on the desktop computer that my parents kept in the living room.
Okay.
That would have been typical at that time. I was late to getting a smartphone, so using a desktop computer would have been more comfortable for me. And it was common just to jump on the computer. There wasn't any login or anything, so it was just getting on the internet.
Okay, what do you think about that? Now, when I go to my parents' house, my mom has a computer, my dad has a computer. I'll sometimes jump on my mom's computer. I'll do searches. I've done that before, believe me. Searched up restaurants or maybe I'll log on and check my email or whatever. I did it more so years ago before I had a smartphone or before I would travel with my laptop. But I understand what she's saying, especially if she was always over there. But we'll get back in a minute to what Lindsay Blake says in response to this searching at a really interesting time, the day before Tylee Ryan is buried in the yard. Emma goes on to talk about the house and how the cozy cone, the add-on to the house in the back that has the stairs that go up, there was a mattress in there that the kids would often go up and play their musical instruments in there. We've heard a lot about that, the stairs. She talks about, this was interesting, that Chad has more fundamental LDS beliefs versus what Emma believes. Emma kind of described herself as, I guess, a more modern Latter-day Saint versus Chad, who was more into Joseph Smith, Brigham Young type of teachings from the early days of the church. That Chad was, again, fundamental into these beliefs. And Emma was more, I guess you could say, progressive. But she really made it out to make it sound like Tammy was into these things. And I'm just going to play this clip where she's asked about light and dark, and that it is if we walked out of the courtroom and someone said she just threw her mom under the bus. I'm not saying that someone did, that these were Tammy's beliefs. And here is what she said when asked about the light and the dark beliefs.
There's been some discussion about the idea of light and dark. Can you describe to me what you understand to be the concept of light and dark?
The phrases good and evil would be talking about your actions, what you chose to do, where light and dark would be talking about your motivations. Light, it means that you're acting selflessly like the Savior would be, and dark means that you're selfish, focusing inward like Satan would be.
Okay, was this something that your mother, from your discussions with your family, shared with your father in terms of her beliefs?
Yes,
So would it be fair to say that your mother's beliefs, to your knowledge, were also of the fundamental or traditional node?
probably more so than him.
Okay. Did she ever have discussions about putting numbers, death percentages or numbers, whether how light and how dark a person would be?
Yes,
Did she do that frequently?
yes.
Okay. Was it particularly about anybody, or was it as her day-to-day activities, she would make comments about that?
As she came across people and observed things, she would mention it.
Objection, Your Honor, calls for hearsay.
Sustained.
Okay. Now, you had an occasion personally to deal with your mother's rating system in terms of dark. Is that correct?
Several.
Okay. And was there an occasion when your mother engaged in a practice of trying to rid some sort of dark entity from you?
Yes.
And can you describe what that was about?
Objection, Your Honor, relevance.
Overruled.
Can you describe what that was about, please?
I have struggled with anxiety for years, and it was feeling very unmanageable. And I felt like there was a being that was with me. And I talked to my parents about it. And my dad cast it out using the power of the priesthood. And then I felt better afterwards.
Okay. When you say the power of the priesthood, what do you mean by that?
The power of God given by the laying on of hands.
Is that something that has to be specially endowed upon something, or is that some sort of patriarchal role that someone gets as head of a family household?
Any eligible man can have it
Okay.
if they're living and keeping covenants in the church.
Okay.
All right. Lindsay Blake followed up later on and said, when you're having an affair, are you keeping covenants in the church? And Emma said no. She talked about, so there we heard that, according to Emma, Tammy was apparently grading people, light, dark, whatnot. Somebody very close to Tammy texted me during the testimony and said, I have never heard this. This is We don't know where this is coming from. Well, I think they believe they know where it's coming from Chad, but they were not aware and had never heard Tammy talk like this about anybody. There was a lot of talk about the paintball gun versus a real gun. When Alex Cox showed up in the driveway, did he really have a paintball gun? Tammy described it as a paintball gun. John Pryor's made a really big deal about this. Or was it a real AR weapon? According to Emma, her mom was knowledgeable about paintball guns. She had gone paintballing before, had a big brother that liked a paintball gun. But when asked both to Emma and Garth if they'd ever seen their mom with a paintball gun, if they'd ever gone paintballing with her, both of them said they didn't know. Now we're going to get into the day Tammy died. First of all, I played the clip earlier that Tammy was apparently getting sick, gaining weight, slowing down, going to bed early, really lethargic, I guess you could say, and that her kids were kind of concerned about her health. She got the Fitbit to be healthy. Here's a Facebook post that was shared with me that Emma put up the day her mother died. We are so overwhelmed by the outpouring of love all of you have shown our family. As early as and unexpected as this feels, there's a sweet peace around my mother's death. My father gave me a priesthood blessing earlier and said that my mother was greeted in the arms of the Savior. As much as I don't want it to be, it was her time. In a typical Tammy way, she was efficient and completed her life's work in a record amount of time. The funeral will be such and such. Tammy's last day was happy and says much about her character. We got the elementary school library ready for the book fair next week. She was so excited about some books that she was going to hand out to the kids for free. She obtained the books through her grants she researched outside of school. Her job was stressful, but she loved the kids and was a rock for many of them. Mom helped me pick up Chase from daycare yesterday because she loaned her truck to Joe for the evening. She always was willing to loan us things and wanted to help us out in any way she could. Chase reached for her as soon as he realized Grandma was there. She carried him outside and snuggled him. Chase normally cries and fights going into the car seat, but he let Grandma buckle him in. Mom had me drop her off at my house so she could help Chase get out of the car. He took her by the finger and they walked to the front door. I hugged my mom and told her I loved her, but I wish I had hugged her tighter. I'm not going to hug her again for a very long time. Obviously a very touching post, sentimental post. I feel for her. No mention that her mom was sick. No mention that while she was preparing for the book fair, my mom felt out of breath. Please don't misunderstand, I'm not judging her for what she wrote here. Normally, I've covered, sadly, plenty of deaths. When we cover unexpected deaths in the news, we often go to social media pages to find out, one, how the person died, and two, if the family members are talking. Most of the time, people will say, my mother's death, my father's death was unexpected, but he had been complaining of shortness of breath, or my mom had been slowing down over the past few months or years, something along those lines. This post, nothing like that. Nothing like what she said today in the testimony. Now, in all fairness, sometimes it takes a minute for things like that to sink in, for us to mentally to put the pieces together. But, you know, if my mom were to die tomorrow, even though she's elderly in her 70s, sorry, Mom, she's not elderly. She's very young, so full of energy. I would say, you know, while my mom was advanced in age, my father has been battling health issues. If he were to suddenly die tomorrow, I hope that doesn't happen. I would probably, if I did a post, say my dad has struggled with, and, you know, kind of explaining his health issues. I don't know if what I'm saying is making sense, but there's nothing at all in this Facebook post about her mom being sick, about her mom gaining weight, about her mom changing. Everything was great at the book fair, she said, right before all this. And then her mom passed away. Many of you picked up there were no tears from the witness stand with her. And, you know, again, we're not to judge the testimony. Some people get very emotional on the stand. Some people don't. We didn't see any emotion from Emma. We did see Chad nodding often when she was talking. We did see Chad far more engaged with his children than we have with other witnesses. But here's how Emma testified about the day her mother passed away. October 19th, 2019. They lived kitty corner to the house. Joseph, her brother, saw a deputy at the house, went in to get Emma. They tried to call Chad. They tried to call Tammy. They tried to call Garth. No one answered, so they started to walk over. And that's when Garth greeted them and told them what had happened. And here's what Emma had to say.
Talk a little bit about the day of your mother's passing. And if you need to take a break or use a tissue, please let me know, or water. Please stop me and we'll take whatever time you need, okay? You arrived at your mother and father's home approximately when on that day?
I don't recall an exact time, but it was before 7 o'clock in the morning.
Did you have an occasion to talk to Coroner Dye?
I did.
Can you tell me what the nature of that not necessarily what Coroner Dye expressed to you, but what you expressed to Coroner Dye?
Coroner Dye was inspecting my mom's body, and she asked us some questions about our wishes, and she offered an autopsy. In the area that we live in, the body would have to be taken to Boise, which is about 5 hours away, and it would delay the funeral. And this is my own personal view. I don't think autopsies should be done on anyone. And the idea of my mother's body undergoing that was very distressing to me.
Okay. Did your father at the time in front of Coroner Dye ever express an opinion as to whether he felt one way or the other about getting an autopsy?
He did not.
Objection, Your Honor, calls for speculation, lack of foundation.
If you would rephrase that, Mr. Pryor, to make sure it's something she observed and not through other
Okay.
means.
Did you ever observe your father have a discussion with Coroner Dye on the subject of an autopsy?
My father was very distressed and was not speaking at that moment.
Okay.
He didn't express any opinion.
Okay. Did you express an opinion to Coroner Dye about what your wishes were?
I did not want an autopsy.
Did your father agree with you or disagree, or do you know what kind of a position he may or may not have taken at that point?
He nodded.
Okay. But he wasn't the one insisting, to your recollection, on having an autopsy done, was he?
Objection, Your Honor, calls for speculation.
Sustained.
At any time, did your father express an opinion as to whether or not he wanted an autopsy or not?
Objection, Your Honor, this calls for speculation.
Overruled.
May I
any-
vote voir dire a native objection?
That's the way it was worded. It's a proper question the court will determine. So go ahead, Mr. Pryor.
Can answer that question, Emma.
Will you repeat it?
Madam Clerk, would you repeat the question for Emma?
Objection, Your Honor, hearsay. This calls for hearsay.
Overruled.
Go ahead.
He never expressed an opinion.
Okay. At the time of the discovery, the passing of your mother, how would you describe your father's emotions?
He was more distressed than I've ever seen him in my entire life. I'm used to, well, at that time I was an adult, but he felt like an adultier adult. I was used to my parents being in control and in charge, and seeing him so distressed and emotionally out of control was very scary to me. And I didn't doubt his grief at all. I'd never seen him more upset than in that moment.
Would you be able to assess whether that was genuine grief or not?
It appeared to be genuine grief.
Is there any doubt in your mind?
No doubt at all.
Okay. You understand that at the time he was involved in an affair with another woman, correct?
Correct.
But in spite of that, you still felt that he was genuinely grieved about your mother's death.
But I know that the grief that he felt was real. He may not have had the same romantic relationship with my mother that he had in the past, but I know that he valued her as a person, and seeing her die was very traumatic.
Okay, so she says Chad was beside himself, couldn't control his emotions, and was just so grieved when Tammy died, even though he was having the affair with Lori at the time. And she was actually asked about the text that Chad sent to Lori about everyone thinks I'm sad, but it's not for the reason they think. It's because he couldn't be with Lori. The trip to Knott's Berry Farm was brought up. This was the trip that Garth, Emma, their spouses took after Tammy died. Lori met them there at the park in California. Emma testified that Flam Funeral Home only gave them two options for Tammy's funeral. They said it could either be on a Tuesday or a Saturday. Now, Flam Funeral Home, from what past testimony said, they embalmed her, but I don't even know if they embalmed her. They were originally called, but it was that mortician, the funeral director, Schultz from Utah, who came up to get the body and went back with Jason Gwillem to Utah. So, and remember, he testified that Chad's the one that contacted Steve Schultz to say, how quick can we have the funeral? And Flam, from what I understand, was not involved because Schultz drove up, picked up Tammy, and took her down to Utah. Maybe Flam had her embalmed in Idaho, but I understood that this all happened in Utah. But she could have been involved. She could have been embalmed that morning, quickly at Flam Funeral Home, and then immediately taken down to Utah for the funeral. So there was some confusion there on my end based on what Emma said, that Flam told them they could only do Tuesday or Saturday. But Flam didn't do the funeral. It was done by the funeral director in Utah. That stuck out to me. She was asked about the pet cemetery. Tammy loved animals. According to Emma, if the cat was hit on the road, a stray cat, Tammy would still bury the cat in the pet cemetery. No one told the family about the exhumation of their mom. They were upset by that they didn't get a heads up. They learned after the fact that it was happening. Chad, at the funeral of Tammy, according to Emma, was typical of she said, of a Latter-day Saint spouse. He'd sometimes cry, he'd sometimes laugh. She just said it was like a typical LDS dad. Then it was time for cross-examination. Lindsay Blake was doing the cross. It was about 40 minutes. And if you really want to watch, go watch. Because it was hard to choose what to play tonight. But here is a couple of things I will play. Well, let me just play the clip and we'll talk about it.
You've been talking with your dad almost daily over the last several years, correct?
Yes.
Lots of conversations with your dad.
Yes.
Do you recall your dad in early June of 2020 telling you not to cooperate with law enforcement?
I don't remember him saying that.
You don't remember a phone call in which he relayed to you, probably better if you just don't cooperate?
I don't remember that.
Do you remember then telling the FBI you were not going to meet with them anymore?
I chose not to do that because of counsel from another attorney.
But it was after having that conversation with your dad, correct?
No.
Was it after June 9th of 2020 that you told him that?
Yes.
After June 10th of 2020 that you told him that?
I don't remember.
Do you recall visiting with your dad as well?
Yes.
Do you recall a visit on around November 23rd of last year?
Not specifically.
Do you recall having a visit where you and your dad talked about that 5K race?
Yes.
And do you recall your dad telling you that you might want to say certain things?
No.
You don't recall that?
No.
Do you recall then talking about a race in 2013?
Yes.
You recall your dad saying, once again, maybe say that?
No.
Do you recall your dad talking to you about the one that exercised with you at Zumba that Tammy wasn't able to keep up? She would just make up her own moves. Do you recall your dad telling you that?
No.
But you've had a lot of visits with your dad,
Yes.
so it may be hard to remember everything he's told you.
He's never told me to say anything.
So you don't recall him telling you those things.
No.
You talked about you were worried about your mom's health,
Yes.
but your mom went to a doctor, right? She'd been there for a wrist recently.
Just for the wrist.
Surprised you to learn that no mention of current anemia in her medical records?
Because she hadn't been to the doctor since 2017.
When did your mom go to the doctor for a wrist?
In 2019. That's
Okay.
a 2-year gap.
You just answer the question. So when did your mom go for her wrist?
In 2019.
Her medical records say nothing about current anemia. Does that surprise you?
Yes.
Her medical records say nothing about sleep apnea, correct?
I don't know.
Would it surprise you that they don't say anything about sleep apnea?
No.
Talked about your mom going to bed early. Again, what time did you say she'd go to bed?
It varied depending on the day, but 5, 6, 7 o'clock.
Were you over at the residence when she'd go to bed?
Usually,
Would you go in and visit with her?
if she was awake.
Would you go watch her while she was in bed?
No.
So you don't know what she did when she went to bed. Fair to say?
Fair.
So you don't know what she would do with the Fitbit when she went to bed, right?
I watched her do it several times.
Several times. You didn't watch her nightly go to bed.
I did not.
You say your mom went to bed that early, 6, 7 at the latest. Is that your recollection?
On some nights, she probably stayed up later.
How much later?
I don't know.
Because you weren't there, right?
Correct?
So surprised you to learn that on October 18th, there was activity on her phone at 10:22 p.m.
No.
That's a lot later than 7.
She had been sick that night. I stay up later when I'm sick and have just thrown up as well.
Were you there that night?
No.
Did you see her throw up?
No.
So you don't know.
Nope.
You only know what you were told.
Yes.
Again, it was a lot of that back and forth, back and forth. Lindsay Blake trying to get to the bottom of what happened. Notice that when Samantha, Tammy's sister, would testify about her sister, she was often in tears. When Tammy's friends spoke about going to see Tammy, they were in tears. When they talked about their last encounter, they were with tears. Nothing from Emma. Again, people grieve differently. I'm not saying that she should have cried. It was but the whole testimony was defensive. It was some say robotic. It rehearsed, you could say. I'm not saying she rehearsed it. The body language experts would have a lot to say, I think, about the testimony. And this, again, cross-examination was 40 minutes of this. We mentioned the book fair. We mentioned that we didn't mention, but it was on the Facebook post. Joe, Emma's husband, needed to borrow Tammy's truck to go help with potato harvest. There was a lot of talk today about the truck, and many of you asked, why such a big deal about the truck? Well, when Tammy got home from the meeting, when Alex Cox came and shot at her, I believe John Pryor is trying to insinuate that whoever shot at her thought Chad Daybell was in that vehicle, because Tammy was not driving her normal vehicle. So he could say whoever was after was not necessarily after Tammy, or it could have just been a random thing. They didn't know it was Tammy. That's why there's a lot of talk about the vehicle. Joseph said he had to go get the keys from Tammy, from her, making it sound like Tammy drove the truck. On the other hand, they did testify that there were sets of keys to both vehicles on both keychains. It's kind of like my wife and I. I have keys to her car and my car on my ring. She has keys for her car and my car on her ring, or she did until she lost him at an Easter egg hunt. But that is what was talked about there. Emma talked about how her mom was playing a Wii game, an exercise game. And I talked about the 5K earlier. Now, remember the life insurance that was talked about a few minutes ago? Emma said that she was with her mom at the school on the day that they filled out the form, and they both checked the box without any consultation with their husbands. They both filled out the form, turned it in, nothing with the husbands. Well, Lindsay Blake pulled that out. Lindsay Blake showed it to Emma Murray. Lindsay Blake showed it to the jury, to you, to me. Chad Daybell's signature is on that. Not only that, but shout out to Crystal, one of my wife's really good friends who was texting her. The date on the form is a Sunday. If they filled out this form on a Sunday, they weren't working on Sunday. So, like a lot of people, my wife and I, anytime I have insurance or whatever, renewals for the year, we go home. I might sit through the presentation at work. I go home. I talk about it with my wife. We fill it out together on a Sunday night. That's when we can talk and plan the week or whatever. Well, Lindsay Blake brought the receipts, brought the forms. Here's how that went down.
And counsel talked to you about an insurance policy that was increased. Do you recall that?
Yes,
And you said your mom did that on her own.
yes.
Why was your dad's signature on the application?
I think she took out insurance on him.
Your Honor, may I be handed States Exhibit 151?
Yes.
Did you have a chance to look that over?
Yes,
Do you see on the back page whose signatures were there?
yes.
And whose are those?
It says employee's signature, Tamara M. Daybell. Spouse's signature of applying for coverage, Chad G. Daybell.
And do you see dates by those?
9/8/19.
Is it the same date on both signatures?
Yes,
And can you see that that's only insurance for your mother?
yes,
Your Honor, may I be handed that exhibit?
Yes, I'll have.
Do you see kind of towards the bottom a box marked with an amount?
yes.
And what is that box?
80,000.
And then is this back page the page you were just looking at?
Yes,
And Miss Marie, I believe you indicated that your parents would share their passwords with each other.
yes,
So is it fair to say that they could access each other's accounts?
yes.
So your dad could delete emails or block contacts on your mom's account?
If he knew how.
If he knew how. Is it possible that that email that Charles Vallow sent to Tammy saying your husband and my wife are having an affair, we need to meet, that was deleted and then his email was blocked from her account, is it possible that maybe Chad got into it? Chad had no geolocation turned on his phone during any of this. That's why we have cell phone movements of Alex Cox. We have an iCloud from Lori Vallow. We have not heard, the prosecution did not present, and they would have, much digital data from Chad Daybell. He knew, or at least was incredibly lucky, to have all that turned off. All of it turned off. I would
you
have to
ever
do some
ask your
research.
dad?
Whoops. I would have to do some research, honestly, to figure out how to turn off mine. But he knew how to turn it off. So the video of Emma and Chad chatting as police are searching the property for JJ and Tylee was played. Remember that? I played it one of the very first days. I'm not going to play it tonight. You can go watch the whole thing. We posted it. Where Chad's in the backseat of the police car, Emma comes up. They let them have a conversation. There's cameras rolling. Many of you were so upset that they let them talk for so long. But think about it from law enforcement's perspective. They want to listen in and see what these two have to say. And the whole conversation that we heard, most of it was about the finances, the money, the accounts, how to pay the mortgage, things like that. And Emma asked her dad about JJ and Tylee. And remember, this is the part I talked about a second ago about her searching for the southwest winds. Here's how Lindsay Blake talked to her about that.
Where JJ Vallow was?
Yes.
What did he tell you?
He told me that he was in a safe place.
Did you ever ask your dad where Tylee Ryan was?
Yes.
What did he tell you?
In a safe place.
Do you know where JJ and Tylee were found?
Yes.
Where?
In the backyard
Of whose property?
of my dad's property.
You indicated that you live kitty corner to your parents', or that you did live kitty corner to your parents' residence. Is that right?
Yes, I used to.
What direction was that from your parents' residence?
It was towards Rexburg, which I believe is to the southwest.
And you indicated that on September 8th, you were searching for southwest wind.
Yes.
So you happened to be searching for southwest wind the last day Tylee Ryan was seen alive?
Yes.
The day before Alex Cox or a device associated with him was on your dad's property.
Yes.
The day before your dad sent your mom a message about shooting a raccoon and burning limbs on that property.
Yes.
Have you tried to discern light and dark?
Yes.
Did your dad ever teach you about zombies?
No.
Did he ever teach you about castings?
Yes.
And I think you talked about your mom doing something like that.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Would you qualify that as a casting?
What my mother would do?
Yes.
Yes.
And you said that it helped you.
Yes.
Are you still alive?
Yes.
When your dad would talk to you about castings, did he explain to you anything about the body having to die?
No.
Explain anything to you about the body having to be destroyed?
No.
And again, didn't talk to you about zombies.
No.
Were you privy to all your dad's conversations with people?
No.
But your dad liked to share his views, correct?
Yes.
Your dad ever talked to you about Alex Cox?
No.
Did your dad ever talk to you about Lori Vallow before your mom passed away?
No.
So you don't know what he talked to Lori and Alex about.
I don't.
When did you learn that your dad was having an affair with Lori Vallow?
After he was arrested.
Was it quite a while after he was arrested?
Well, I heard about things in the news after Lori was arrested in February of 2020, but I learned more after he was arrested very shortly after, once again, the news.
Do you recall participating in an interview where you indicated that you didn't believe he'd had a physical affair?
Yes.
And that was about sometime in 2021?
Yes.
Did you know of the physical affair at that point?
No.
So it was sometime after that that you learned of the physical affair?
Yes.
Were you there when your dad was providing your mom's medical history to Deputy Greenalch, the officer?
Yes.
Were you there when he provided it to Deputy Coroner Cammie Wilmore?
Yes.
And were you there when he provided it to Coroner Brenda Dye?
Yes.
Did you provide any statements about your mom's health at that time?
I don't remember.
You said that you had serious concerns about her health though, right?
Yes.
But you don't remember if you said anything.
She wasn't talking to me, so I didn't answer her.
At any point, did you reach out to law enforcement to tell them about any concerns you had about your mom's medical conditions?
It wasn't a crime, so no.
You were asked about when your mom was exhumed. Did you know there was going to be an autopsy?
I assumed there would be.
Did you reach out to anyone then to let them know of your concerns?
Family members.
Did you reach out to law enforcement?
No, I didn't feel like they would help me since they were the ones conducting it.
But you didn't reach out to them with any concerns.
No.
There's a lot there. There's a lot there. There's a lot there. And, you know, share your thoughts with me. I think I'll just move right to how Lindsay Blake ended it. This was Lindsay Blake's closing questions for Emma Daybell. Can you imagine being in Lindsay Blake and Rob Woods, that all of those prosecutors' shoes? They have been waiting 4 years to talk to the kids, to get something out of the children. Something. And today was the day. Because they haven't talked to the cops. You've heard what the extent of their conversation. Garth was a little different. We'll talk about that in a minute because we learned some big news today about a possible perjury. This is how Lindsay Blake wrapped it up with Emma Daybell.
Do you recall conversation that day about a body being located?
Yes.
And do you recall then a conversation about a second body being looked for?
A conversation with my dad?
Yes.
Yes.
Whose bodies were those?
Tylee Ryan and JJ Ballo.
I have nothing further.
All right, thank you.
Okay, that conversation took place there on the backseat of that cop car. From what we have seen, there was no emotion or anything about, Dad, quit talking about the Wells Fargo account. Why are the cops digging up the backyard? Why are 2 children buried in our yard? It was, okay, pay the mortgage from this account. Oh, we already paid it this month. You can pay it. Don't forget to send Lori $30 a month. She's in jail. Give her the stipend, not the stipend, but do it through the account. And yeah, I'm not coming back. I'm not coming back. There's so much to say. There's so much to say, but I don't give opinion. I give you facts and I tell you what happened. But I know a lot of you have opinions, and you know, I'll leave it at that. I do want to say one thing. The Daybell children did do an interview, as I mentioned, with CBS News 48 Hours in 2021. And that is the interview I believe Lindsay Blake was referring to when they said their dad was having an emotional affair, not a sexual affair. And that they were claiming that in 2021. And that was asked about today, Emma, and I don't know, she kind of, when she was asked about the affair, she kind of, I don't know, I want to say dodged, but just really didn't give a straight answer as to if her thought has changed about when that affair was happening. She said she has not watched any of the testimony. She would be allowed to. She's not held under the same rules that other witnesses are, that they're not supposed to watch it because she's a victim. Her mom was killed or is accused of being killed. And because of that, she and the other children are victims. So victims have more rights than the average witness. So they could listen to testimony. They might be watching right now. Emma, if you're watching, I'd love to talk with you on or off the record. I think it's important to hear your perspective. We heard a lot today, and I'd love to hear more. Let's move on to Garth Daybell. He was living with his parents at the time that his mom died. Garth is a teacher, science teacher, and he also had a part-time gig in October working at a haunted house. He'd go and be a scare person. He talked and was asked about raccoons. There was a lot of raccoons hanging around the property. I don't doubt that one bit. They had some traps that they borrowed from a neighbor, and the raccoons were getting into the pet food, were getting into the rabbit food, and they were worried they'd eventually get in and kill their rabbits. Whenever one of the raccoons was shot, it would be buried behind the silver shed. And what's interesting is John Pryor tried to find out if any of these raccoons were buried by the pet cemetery, which was different. And Garth held firm that no, excuse me, they were buried behind the silver shed, not the pet cemetery. So the fact that Chad Daybell did say in that text to his wife, I shot a raccoon and buried it in the pet cemetery, according to Garth, those raccoons that were shot were buried behind the silver shed. Garth was concerned about his mother's health, and he testified of that. And here's what he said about his mom's health leading up to the day she died.
Now, are we confusing the raccoons? You know that you buried some in the silver shed. Is there possibly that some were buried in the pet cemetery?
I think, or they were all buried behind the silver shed.
Okay. Now, we talked a little bit with your sister about your mother's health issues. What concerns did you have about your mother's health?
I was concerned that she was getting tired extremely easily, that she would work extremely hard all day and then just come home and collapse.
Okay. And did you ever encourage her to seek medical help?
I did. She had hurt her arm, and I wanted her to go get it looked at. She was trying to rub this bruising ointment on it.
Okay.
She refused to go.
Okay. At some point, she did go to the doctor for the injury. However, do you recall that?
I don't recall the exact time that happened.
Okay. Were there other issues that you had concerns about your mother's health?
We worked in the yard together a lot, and I was her muscle. She would direct me where to dig and move stuff and cinder blocks and garden things, and yeah, she had a hard time doing those heavier things.
And why do you say she had a hard time with it?
She would get really winded really easily.
Okay. And is that something that happened in the last year of her life, or was that the entire time that you knew her?
I would say it became increasingly more towards the end of her life.
Okay. Okay. Were there any other concerns about any sort of other medical issues of her being able to keep her balance or anything like that that caused you concern?
She would have fainting spells.
And how often would that happen?
It was usually after she'd been kneeling for a while.
Okay.
All right. So this is testimony we apparently haven't heard before, but he says that his mom would have fainting spells. Chad was at home the day that Tammy died. Garth was at the haunted house. And Garth recalled the night before he got home from school. So he worked school. It was a Friday. That his mom said, I'm really tired. Can you go get us some McDonald's? I don't feel like cooking tonight. Garth went and got the McDonald's, brought it home, and then he went off to the haunted house. Got home from the haunted house around 1 a.m., went into his bedroom, started watching YouTube videos, fell asleep around 3. Next thing he knows, Dad's waking him up saying, I need your help. That he heard a thump and that Dad needed his help. Here's what he testified about the day his mom died. Now, again, I'm not one to judge, but if my mom suddenly died, I'll tell you a personal story. My grandfather, when I was a teenager, my dad was working in New Hampshire for 9 months. He was away from home for a long time. My grandfather came up to help fix a sprinkler or something. We had an issue with the water thing. He was in the front yard. I was the man of the house. My big brother was away, and I was helping my grandpa. I went inside the house. I came back out. My grandfather was like clutching his chest, walking into the house, and my mom was helping him in the house. He was out of breath. We brought him in the house. We laid him down. I called 911 for the first time in my life. They told us to give him an aspirin, and he the ambulance came. They took him to the hospital. We followed him. I drove my grandpa's truck to follow him to the hospital. We got to the hospital. As he was being wheeled out of the ambulance, he said, the keys, or don't, something about the keys to the truck. And I already had his truck. I'm like, I have your keys, Grandpa. And he went in and he died at the hospital. He had a heart attack and died. That day is forever impressed on my mind. I had to call my dad and tell him that, that he died, and then I had to be there when my grandmother came to the hospital and she was told with the doctor. I remember like every detail of that day. It's still hard to talk about. I'm not judging Garth Daybell for not getting emotional about walking into his mother's room and finding her dead and having to lift her up and him saying that she was cold and stiff. Everybody handles grief differently and emotions differently. But again, the testimony, well, you judge. Here's what he said.
I want to talk to you a little bit about the evening of October 18th. Okay, and that was the evening before your mother passed.
Yes.
You were working that day, and you mentioned something about in October you were working at a scare what?
So there's a local haunted house in Teton, Idaho, which is about 20-ish, maybe half an hour away from where I lived, and a seasonal attraction that I would go work. I'm dressed up in a costume to scare people.
Okay. And at that point, did you have an occasion before going in to do that to come home
Come home from,
your first job?
yes.
And walk me through that as to what after you got home from work from the first job, what did you do next?
So I came home, and mom usually came home before me, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
And she told me, I just don't feel good today. I don't want to cook tonight. Can you go get some McDonald's for us?
Now that's a long way to a McDonald's, is it not?
Well, I mean, we're used to driving into town for various things,
So
so
then what town did you drive to for the McDonald's?
Rexburg.
Okay. And forgive me, I don't recall if there is a McDonald's in Rexburg.
There's two.
Oh. Okay. Then did you get some food for you folks?
I did.
Who did you get food for?
So I bought food for me and my father and my mother.
Okay, do you recall what you got for your mother?
Her favorite meal was the quarter pounder with cheese.
A healthy meal.
Depends.
And anything else?
I don't remember if she wanted anything else with it, and fries.
Okay.
Yeah, I feel like I got her a combo.
And then you went to work at the Haunted Mill. Is that what that's called?
Yep. So so about 7-ish, I left, and she was sitting on the couch and said, have a fun time. We'll see you tomorrow. I'll let you sleep in.
Okay. And then at some point you got home at about what time?
So I got home about 1 a.m. shortly after that.
Okay. And then at that point, again, you previously testified the distance between your bedroom and your mother and father's bedroom. Is that right?
Yes.
And the distance there was about how far?
About 20 feet.
Okay. And then at some point, did you hear anything coming from your mother and father's bedroom?
As I passed their bedroom, I heard my father snoring.
And is it clear that it was your father snoring?
Yes.
Okay. You had no other indication of that your mother was snoring or making any noise?
I didn't hear anything of that sort.
You didn't see any images in the bedroom of any kind of a struggle or a fight or any kind of an altercation, did you?
No, as far as I knew, it was a normal night.
Okay. And then at some point, what did you do after you went into your bedroom?
I got on my computer and I watched YouTube for a few hours,
And when you say a few hours, what does that mean?
till about 3 a.m. So
Okay.
2 hours-ish.
Okay.
Okay. Then we heard probably the big, headline out of Garth Daybell's testimony was that a grand jury was held on possible allegations that he perjured himself. And so, little background. A grand jury is a secret jury. where people are contacted in the community in Fremont County, and they are asked to come to the courthouse, and it's a secret proceedings. It's not open to the public. It's not open to the press. The prosecutor holds the jury. Like, there's not really a judge there presiding. The prosecutor presents all the evidence they have, and then the jury decides whether someone should be charged and with what. And that's what happened with Chad and Lori. A grand jury was held, and then the indictment came out that we're facing today. All of these charges came from a grand jury. The 3 counts of first-degree murder, conspiracy, grand theft, and insurance fraud. The grand jury met and said Chad and Lori Daybell should be charged with these charges, with a slight modification on Lori Vallows. She didn't have a first degree for Tammy, and I don't believe she had insurance fraud either. But then a second grand jury was called on Garth Daybell because the first grand jury requested that he be looked into for perjury. That's the way I understand it, the way that it was brought up today. And in fact, they were saying that he threatened to change his story. They said he changed his story. He was brought down to Rexburg Police to talk about his story and if it was still accurate. He talked about getting investigated by the police, getting questioned. His wife was also brought in. Nothing came of those perjury allegations. But it was interesting to hear. We could have had a third person charged in connection to this case. A third trial, but we didn't. Lindsay Blake got up on cross. She had a few more questions for Garth. She had a lot of questions for Garth, but here's just a piece.
Do you recall talking to an individual named Micaiah Bagelin and telling him you found your mom dead in her bed and your dad gone?
I don't recall talking to him about that.
Do you recall talking to Cara Briggs, who's now Cara Daybell, and Emma Moss about finding your mom on the couch?
I told Kara. She's now my wife.
And there was talk of some testimony at some grand juries. Do you recall that? Sorry, let me back up. Let me rephrase that. Do you recall counsel asking you about having testified at a couple proceedings?
Sorry, I don't quite know the rules, but when you're talking to me about Kara and Emma, can you repeat that question? I don't know if
Yes. Do you recall telling Cara and or Emma about finding your mom on the couch?
I did not tell them that she was on the couch.
Do you recall having talked to one or both of them?
I do. I had told them that the night before I had seen her on the couch as she said goodbye to me.
And if they were to say something different, would that surprise you?
I mean, I've heard that before.
Okay, so something's up with the story there. According to what was introduced there, he said something about the mom being on the couch, his mom being on the couch, but also the him finding his mom and his dad wasn't home. But then he said that never happened. And that probably has to deal with the perjury stuff, the stories not being straight. Grand jury proceedings are sealed. It'd be amazing to go back and get this transcript from that and see exactly what played out. But again, Garth Daybell has not been charged and, is innocent of the crimes, at least up until this point, he hasn't been charged. Then his attorney came on the stand. His attorney, Forrest Fisher, an attorney based out of Driggs, who, when the grand jury was happening, Mr. Fisher testified that he was called to come and be an attorney for Garth. He couldn't actually be in the proceedings, but he was right outside the door, and he told Garth, if you need me, come out and get me. He apparently told Garth that this is a trap, that they'll try to get him in, and he testified that this often happens with prosecutors once they have their eye on somebody. It was a short testimony. It was interesting that they had him testify. And then we went straight into Joseph Murray. And he's going to be back on the stand tomorrow. I think we've gone really long tonight, so I won't play any clips. He talked about needing the truck for potato harvest, and so many of you have emailed me within the past hour from the Facebook post I showed you earlier with Emma. Remember how there was all this discussion over who drove what vehicle, and John Pryor was insinuating, and Emma, I believe, testified that her dad drove the truck and the mom drove the Equinox. Well, on this Facebook post, she says she loaned her truck to Joe for the evening. Column 3, third sentence down. So she's saying that her mom was driving the truck and it was her mom's truck, not she loaned my dad's truck to Joe for the evening. And that was the vehicle that was in the driveway when Alex Cox showed up with the gun. Joe Murray said he had to borrow the truck, so he got the keys from his mother to go help with potato harvest. He also testified that Tammy was in ill health and her health was failing. He testified about the shed that was on the property, how really it's not locked and anybody could have access to it. Talked about the different driveways, that there was a place to get to the property and get on the property without being seen visibly from the home. So I think they're insinuating that maybe someone could sneak on the property and bury the bodies, I guess. He didn't say that. He did not say that. It sounded like they were going down that route, that someone could go down the long driveway and bury the body. So I told you there was a lot today. There's so much. I feel like we haven't even touched it. On days like this, it's like, where do you even start? But we're putting up the testimony witness by witness on our YouTube channel, and you can go back and watch it. Today was our highest watched day ever with this trial. And as I mentioned, more people showed up today than ever before, and a lot did not get in. I would recommend, unless you're like a true diehard, don't go down to the courthouse, because I think this week's going to be very, very busy. And I'd hate for you to come down and not get in when you can sit in your bed and watch it from your phone. They're going to bring back the ticket reservation system next week so that there's a little bit more organization. But I've never seen it like how it was today. All right, I got to get Erica on the phone quickly, and then I want to take your questions because she was in the courtroom today with me. I wanted to get her feedback. She is on her way home. She might be home now. Let's see, if you don't mind.
Hello.
Are you home?
I am not home quite yet, but I am stopped for a moment.
Okay, can you share? We're on live right now. Can you share your insights on court today while I pull up the picture of us in front of the courthouse?
Yes.
What'd you think?
What insights do you want? I did listen to your entire Courtroom Insider tonight.
Your overall take, your overall thoughts.
Well, sketchy. That's my overall thoughts. I thought that Lindsay Blake did an extraordinary job today. I think that the kids were caught in a lot of suspicious things in their testimonies today. I actually took notes. I took notes on my phone about points that I thought you touched on, some of them. But other points that people made in the comments just about some of the testimony, I felt like there were a lot of contradictions for what I know. And there was something especially that with Garth's testimony and being at Lori Vallow's trial, I thought were contradicting of statements I had previously heard. So it was a very, very interesting day at court.
Would you go back?
I would go back if I had someone who was going to take care of my children.
Right. Thank you, by the way.
Without a big hassle.
Shout outs to everyone that helped make this happen. We kind of threw this together kind of last minute, but
Yeah.
we had a lot of help. All right. So, a lot of people making a big deal that the kids didn't show much emotion on the stand. Did that affect you at all? I mean, did you have any insight about that?
I did want to say, you said that Emma showed no emotion, but she did not show emotion when speaking about her mother. However, she did cry when the police car video was shown.
That is, okay, you're right. She did, yeah.
So I did notice that today in court. But like you mentioned, people grieve in different ways. So I'm not necessarily judging that. All people process things differently, but But I did find that interesting that that was the time that she cried, not when speaking about her mother's passing.
Yeah.
I also thought it was interesting that Emma said that her mom was on Prozac but hadn't seen a doctor since 2017, because generally with blood pressure medication or any kind of medication that you are taking for an amount of time, you would need to see a doctor to have that refilled.
Oh, that's an interesting point. Yeah.
So lots of people mentioned that in the comments too. So I do find that curious. Yeah, lots of very interesting tidbits in there today.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, honey. Thanks for coming out, and I'm glad you
Yes.
are nearly home safe.
Me too. So it was good to be there. Good to see you in your element, and to see so many of you that are following this case and are concerned that justice will be served here. I think lots of us are very concerned about that, and it will be interesting to see what happens in the next few weeks
Yeah. People brought us
or
cookies
days.
and jerk chicken. Someone brought us
That's very true.
chicken. Yeah. We saw some old friends.
Yes.
So, all right, honey. Thank you. Love you. I'll call you when we're
Good
done.
night, everyone.
Good
I
night.
love you. Good night.
But she loves you too, just so you know. All right, let me get to some questions that we have. So many here, and some shout outs too. Thank you. We're going really long tonight. Hope that's okay with you. I guess it is if you're still watching. Shout outs. Nate, I'm a big fan of yours. I love East Idaho News. I've been watching you a long time. I'm sure there is not another Paraguayan. She's in Paraguay. Rosie. Paraguayan watching, so please say hello. Thank you, Rosie. Appreciate you watching. Sue Fail from South Carolina is your 73rd birthday. Happy birthday. Good. Thank you for celebrating. We all send you birthday wishes. Jackie V, Shyla, Kiola, Stephanie Smith, Paula Lamb, Danielle Harris, Kendra Angel, Helen and Claire Barris, Carrie Livingston, Christine Larson, saw you in line today. Thank you, Christine. Lindsay Bitter, Stephanie Deerick, Nate Sunderland. Hi, Nate. So good to have you with us. Velma Jones and Michelle Ray. Bless you all for watching. And here we go. Some questions. Pixie says, in your opinion, who chose for Chad to plead not guilty? Did Chad think he could snowball everyone with his defense, or did Pryor believe that he had a tight enough case to win? I think the fact that we didn't have a plea agreement is totally on Chad Daybell. I think that if a decent deal would have been offered, and I believe that there may have been one, as far as you plead guilty and will take death penalty off the table, then I think that we would not be here today. And I think Chad Daybell is the person that said, I want to go all the way to trial. My thoughts. Hi, Kelsey. Many people have commented about the LDS Church and the light and dark teachings. Can Nate talk about Chad labeling people as light and dark as LDS teachings? We talked about this. Witnesses have testified of this. It's not an LDS teaching as far as your light, your dark. The overall Christian themes, I think, have the whole thought of, there are good people, or, there's good and the evil. But as far as you're dark, you're light, you have a score, you don't, that is not a church teaching. This was a Chad Daybell teaching. Were you able to see what the jurors' reactions were to getting conflicting stories on Tammy's health? Cindy asks. The jury is so poker-faced. They were very interested in today's testimony. Personal observation, there's only a certain amount of jurors I can see from my seat. One juror I've seen, he's worn a blue shirt like every day. Every day we watch for him, he's in the blue shirt. Another juror who's had a mustache from day one, he shaved it over the weekend. Didn't recognize him. Like he was known as the mustache guy. No more. But they're tuned in. And I think that they'll put the pieces together. Elizabeth asks, did Chad or Emma know that the police car had a camera rolling while they were talking? I'm wondering why they were guarded in their conversations, not saying things like, Dad, why are the kids buried back there? Because they knew it was being recorded. I don't know if they knew that. I doubt that they knew. I mean, honestly, when you're in that situation, are you really thinking that there's a camera right there watching? Even people that go in for police interviews at the police station often forget that there's cameras rolling once they get talking. I don't know why she didn't ask about why the kids are in the backyard. Why didn't Lindsay Blake play the jail conversations she alluded to? Will she play them in her closing? I don't know why she didn't play them. I would have loved to hear them. Wouldn't you? I mean, they have 4 years worth of jail conversations. We didn't hear them. And I don't know why. I don't know if it will come up again later, perhaps, but I don't know. Many of us noticed today, Cindy says, that Chad was signaling Emma by slight nods and blinks. He hasn't moved for 4 weeks, but all of a sudden he can today. Well, I mean, it was his first witness. It was the defense's first witness. It was his daughter. I'm sure he was a little nervous. I'm sure he was a little excited. I'm sure he was a little hopeful that this might start to tell his story. That's probably why. Brandon says, I'm watching Emma. She seemed very scripted and prepared, but my question is, she's under oath. If she lies, does she face perjury charges? Would Boyce decide that? Could the prosecution ask for it? Well, you could ask to impeach the witness if you have proof that they lied, and then their testimony could be thrown out or could be put into question, and then you could bring a charge. Perjury might be hard to choose if she says that, based on my memory, that's what I recalled. And then if they're a reminder of it, for instance, the form on the insurance, we saw that kind of changed. So, I don't know. There's a lot of talk about the truck today. What does it matter? I don't understand why this matters. I hope I answered that question about the truck, about how that it was the vehicle that Tammy was shot at in. I'm almost... Carla. I've noticed from the beginning that John Pryor does something strange and somewhat unsettling. When he's at the lectern, he looks at the jury and sometimes at the prosecutor or the public when he's cross-examining a witness. Why? I don't know. He does do it. He'll ask the question and then he'll turn, or he'll turn this way, or he'll ask the question looking at the jurors. It's how he's always done it. I don't know why he does it. It's just him. I guess I'm used to it now. Kathy says, I'm wondering what the relationship is between Emma and Garth with Tammy's family. Hearing testimony today, there's an obvious difference of opinion between them. Based on the testimony from Samantha and Jason a couple of weeks ago, they don't have anything to do with the kids anymore. Not on their account, not on their choice. The kids have cut them off. The kids did not go to their grandmother's funeral. They watched it online. They've cut them off. Am I right that the prosecution gets rebuttal after the defense rests? Can they recall the children and any of the defense witnesses? Can they call new witnesses? From what I understand, that's from Alyssa. They can pretty much call any witness in rebuttal as long as it's related to the defense case. And then the defense gets to cross those witnesses, but the same rules apply. It has to relate to the defense's case, though. So I guess they could recall Emma, although I believe they said today that she's released from the subpoena. So I don't think we'll hear from her again. A couple more questions. Can you confirm? I don't know I'm not going to read that one. Rachel asked why they didn't mention Viola. I have no idea. Chad, if Chad's found guilty, what's the process for death penalty sentencing? Who's made that decision? We'll probably revisit this in a few days. I did it at the beginning of Courtroom Insider of this trial. The jury will determine if Chad's guilty or not guilty. If he's guilty, the same jury will then determine if he gets life in prison or death. And that will come after a little mini trial of penalty phase where witnesses will testify for both. Okay, I'm being told Emma was not released from her subpoena. Okay, she was not released. I misspoke. Garth was. Freedom Queen, what do you think about her saying he valued her as a person, but it was traumatic for him watching her die? Oh, Emma said he valued Tammy as a person, but it was traumatic for him watching her die. I don't know. I don't know what I think about that, but I'll let you all decide that. Good question. Nate, isn't it a conflict of interest if Pryor is Emma Garth and Joe's landlord? He can easily sell the property right after the trial, and it could influence their testimony. Yeah, I don't know the ins and outs of that, and Pryor addressed that right up front, and Emma said, my arrangement for my housing is with my dad. I don't know what arrangement he has with you about the house. That's how it was addressed today. When Chad's children were leaving the stand, did you see their faces at any point? How did their emotional state seem to you after they left the stand? They seemed the same. Emma walked right by me to go out. Garth did too. They seemed kind of relieved. I didn't see any look over at Dad like a kiss or I love you. I didn't see any of that. What is it about the steps and the Dodge Dakota? Kathy, I hope I answered those today about the steps on the Fitbit and the Dodge Dakota. What are your thoughts on Emma's contradictory statements? I'll let you decide. I've played some things tonight that hopefully give you a lot to talk about or think about. Being in the courtroom, did the kids' testimony come across as being truthful? Because watching and knowing this case, I felt they were lying. I think there were questions about what the kids said, but I'm not to judge. That was their testimony. They swore they'd tell the truth, and that's on that. That's what they said. So, Chester's mom asks Nate if Pryor owns the house she rents. How in the world have they only spoken 3 times? Good question. I don't know. You all have great questions, but I don't know a lot of these factual answers. I have a lot of opinions on these, but I don't want to open up that door. Why do you think they didn't play the jail calls? We talked about that. Also, my cough seems much better. My cough is all better. Now I have allergies. I had allergy flare-ups over the weekend, but I'm good. And Peggy, I'm not going to get to all these other questions. There's so many questions. We're going to dive deep tomorrow into the questions. We're going to have more witnesses, including Joseph Murray. He's going to start the day, and I'm going to get to the court at who knows what time because I want to get a seat. So I better go to bed. But here's what I can ask you to do. Follow me here on Facebook and Instagram. I'm on X and eastidahonews.com. And we'll start tomorrow at, right here, 6:30 or 8:30 Mountain Time, Daylight Time. With the live stream, watch that. Watch the live written updates all day on eastidahonews.com. If you can't read, you can watch. Courtroom Insider, we're going to have a lot to talk about over the next week or so. 2 weeks, 3 weeks, who knows? Maybe a month, let's hope not. And here's how you can support East Idaho News. So many of you have asked. We have a little donation option if you want. Don't feel obligated, please. eastidahonews.com/donate. All that money goes directly into our newsroom and helps us travel to trials and do stuff like we're doing now. And those of you that ordered a t-shirt, we had Caitlin, our helper, another Caitlin, show up today. She packaged up a ton of t-shirts, so they're starting to get out in the mail. So you should be getting your t-shirt soon. If you didn't order one, we may do another order. I'll keep you posted on that. Also, don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube, right there. Follow us on Facebook. I think I got it all. Thanks so much for watching. Hope you have a great night. We'll be back here tomorrow night. Appreciate all of you watching. See you soon. I'm Nate Eaton. This is Courtroom Insider. Court is adjourned. See you tomorrow.